We're making very good progress. We're able to create posts, view a single post, upload files, validate content, all great. Now, what is missing? We want to be able to edit posts, we want to be able to delete posts, and authentication and users and connecting posts to users. This is all missing. Now, let's continue with editing and deleting posts before we dive into the authentication and user-related things. So for that, let's go to our feed routes in our Node REST API project, and there I'll add a new route. I want to be able to edit posts now, and for that I will use a new HTTP method which we haven't used before. Editing a post essentially is like replacing the old post with a new one. We'll keep the old ID, but that is it. Since we'll replace a resource, I'll use the put method here. And the put method is one you learned about in the last module, but which we haven't used before, because with normal browser forms, you're not able to send it. Through asynchronous requests triggered by JavaScript, you are, however. Now we need a URL here, and the URL will be /post, and then also the ID of the post encoded in the URL, so :post ID. Now we also need a controller action to handle that. The important thing about put requests, and the same is true for patch requests by the way, is that they also have a request body, just like post requests. But you can also have parameters in the URL. Well, that would have been the case for post requests too, by the way. But the important thing is we have a body for these requests. We can add a request body, and that will hold the actual post data that I want to, use and that I want to use to replace my existing post. So let's work on the controller now. In the feed controller, at the bottom, I'll add a new action and I'll name it update post. The name is up to you, but this is what we'll do. We'll update the post in there. This is the function. And in here, in this function, I can first of all retrieve my post ID from my request params, because we just added it there, right? In my route, post ID is a parameter, which of course I can extract. Now, when updating a post, I also will extract my title, so request body title. I will extract my content, request body content, and I want to extract my file, my image URL. However, for that URL, we have two options when updating. The first option is, and that will be my default, that image URL is part of the incoming request and it's just some text in the request body. That would be the case if no new file was added, if no new file was picked. Then my frontend code has all the logic to take the existing URL and keep that. But we might have picked a file, and in this case, request file will be set, and I can now set image URL equal to request file path. This is the alternative. After all of this, at least one of the two should be set. So if image URL is not set at this point, because we were not able to extract it from there, and we did not make it into this if statement, then we should throw an error. So here I will prepare a new error, no file picked. I'll set my status code to 422, and I will throw that error here. So that's my first little piece of validation. We'll add more validation, of course. Normally, we should have an image URL, however. Now, I have one little mistake here, by the way. This should be image here, what I retrieved from the frontend, and we need to tweak our frontend a little bit too. There, in feed.js, in source pages, feed.js, when we load all posts, so in load posts, that is when we basically load the post data from the server, including our image URL. Now, we then store the posts here in the front end so that the rest of the React application, the rest of the code I prepared, can handle that. We need to tweak this line a little bit. There, you should access REST data posts, but we have to map this, which is a default JavaScript method, into a different kind of array, or every element has to be changed a little bit. Map takes a function that executes on every element in the array, and it gets the element, which in our case is a post, as an argument, and then we return the updated version of that object. So I return a new object here where I will use the spread operator to get all the properties of my post object. And then I'll add an image path key here, which is post.image_URL. Now, image URL here is referring to the property I'm storing on my server side. There we're storing the path to the image in an image URL key. You could have named this differently. If you named it differently here, you would have to name it differently here. Now, I'm storing the original path here because when I'm viewing a single post, for example, I do extract that image URL and I append my URL to the domain. Now the path should be, well, just a path without the domain because I'm keeping that here and this will get reused later when we edit this through this edit modal. Behind the scenes, this path will be stored, and if I don't choose a new file here, this path will be submitted with my edited post, and there the path will be stored in a property named image. You can see that in the components, the feed edit component under feed edit. There you could see all the internals. If you know a little bit of React, you can see the internals and see that I'm extracting my image path and I'm storing it in an image key ultimately. I don't want to dive too deep into React, but this is what I'm doing on the front end, and this was one adjustment that was required. And on the server side, we can now extract our image here from the body, and either this is set or we selected a new file, in which case a file will be found. So now we can continue working on update post, and we can continue working by first of all adding more validation, which we do in our routes, of course. Well, there I will copy that array from my post route and I will add it here. So for my put route, I also want to validate the title. By the way, we should switch that back to 5 characters of length for both posting and putting. So I will validate these two things. I'll not validate my image because that is done directly in the controller action. And I don't need to do any other validations for now. So with that added, let's go back to the controller and let's copy the validation logic from the post route where I gather all my errors and then I check for errors not being empty and then I would throw an error. So before I extract anything else, I'll check these things in update post, whether I have any errors, and if I have, I'll throw an error. If I don't have errors, I continue, check the file, and if we make it down here, so after all these if statements, then I know I have valid data, and now we can update it in the database. To update it in the database, I will find my post by ID for the post ID which I extracted from the URL. Then I can do something, or we might have an error. If we have an error, I'll reuse that error handling logic you find in other places, in other actions. So I'll add my status code and then next the error. If I am successful, I know we have no database error. I still need to check if post is undefined, which means we didn't find a post. In which case, I will also throw an error, just as we did it for getting a single post. I can copy that logic. And again, if you're copying a lot of code, you might of course also refactor that. I like the more verbose approach to make sure we all understand each step we take in each action creator. And if we make it past this if check inside of the then block, then we found a post, and then I want to update the post, of course. So here, I'll set my post title equal to the title I extracted. I'll set my post image URL equal to the image URL I extracted, and I'll set my post content equal to the content I extracted. And then I can return post save here to save that updated post back to the database, overwriting the old post but keeping the old ID. And then here we get the result of that save operation. And here I want to return a response with a status code of 200. We didn't create a new resource, so it's not 201. With some JSON code or some JSON data where I say post updated maybe, and where I return that updated post, which is stored in the result in the end. So this is now the updating logic here. There's one more thing we can add, and that is some logic to delete the image. For that, I'll add a little helper function down there, clear image, which is a function that accepts a file path as an argument. And then I will use the file system package NodeJS offers. So I'll import it at the top by requiring fs. And with that imported in that clear image function here, I'll first of all construct my file path, for which I'll also import the path package, by the way. So let's import that at the top too. And now the file path can be constructed by joining dir name, then going up one folder, because we're running this inside of the controllers folder, which is not where we will find images. So we should go up one folder to be in the root folder. And then we look for whatever file path we got here. So images, and then the image name would be the case in our application. And I can then use the unlink function to delete that file by passing the file path to it. And we can also log any error message. And I want to trigger that clear image function whenever I uploaded a new image. So inside of my update post action creator, right before I save my updated post maybe, I'll check if my image URL, which is the path to the image, if that is not equal to post image URL. So to the image URL I stored in my post before. If they're not equal, it obviously changed, so I uploaded a new file. And that is where I will execute clear image and pass the old image URL, so the old path, as an argument. Now with that, we got all in place here in the controller. Now we can go to the route, and there we still need to register that controller action on the put route. So on the feed controller, I'll access update post here. That's one important step. And on the front end, so in the React code, we also need to do something. There, in source, feed.js, in the finish edit handler function there, we need to adjust our code now. There we set up our form data, which is correct for updating as well. But if we are in edit mode, which will be the case if we make it inside this if statement, due to the logic I configured on the front end, we want to send a request to localhost 8080 /feed/post/ and now we need the post ID, which we get from this state edit post._ID. That is where it will be stored in my React app. And I'll set the method to put because we created a put route. Now with that, we can save all that and try it out and hopefully not get an error. Let's edit the second duck here and add a couple of exclamation marks in both title and content. Let's not choose a new file. It's looking good. I see my exclamation marks there. I see them in the content as well. Here, I get a confirmation message that looks good. And on the back end, I still only have one image. Well, that makes sense because I didn't replace it anyways. Let's now replace it by editing that same duck again. Let's not change title and content, but choose a different file. Maybe that coffee mug. Click accept. Post updated is looking good. It's not a duck anymore, so the title is not correct, but on the back end, we only have the coffee mug now. So updating seems to work. And of course, we can confirm this by viewing that image as well. There, we also see all the updated data. So that is working. And with that, only deleting is missing before we can finally start working on authentication.